Welcome to the Gamescape, everybody. My name is Jeric, and today we're back in Phoenix Point, and we are going to take an in-depth look at the Sirens today. One of the basic commander units of the Pandoran forces. These guys, you don't run into them nearly as often as most of your foot soldier types like the Arthrons and the Tritons. But when they do show up, they can be a bit of a handful to deal with. And we're going to kind of take a look at these guys today, and we're going to find out kind of what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, some ideas on how they attack, some ideas on how to deal with them. So let's get right in there and let's get started. The very first one that you're likely to run into is the Siren Instigator. If we take a look, the Siren Instigator has 490 health, which is a good amount. You're going to have to put a couple of soldiers on getting rid of this particular enemy. It's not as easy as gunning down, say, just your regular Arthrons or Tritons or whatever. They actually have some staying power. They have 3 weapons listed here. These are their claw attacks. So the first one is actually the one that it uses if it has both arms still intact. So if we look at this, it has 80 damage, 20 bleed, and a burst of 2, which means it's going to hit you twice for those values. So you're going to end up taking 160 damage and 40 bleed. Effective range is 1. It's a melee attack, so it doesn't miss. Costs 2 action points, 2 hands to use. That's the key here. So if both arms are still intact, it's going to use this attack. If you disable one of the arms, it will use one of these other 2 weapons, depending on which arm is still intact. And they're both the same. It's just one is the left and one is the right arm. And it's the same stats, 80 and 20, 80 damage, 20 bleed. But these are single strike and still 2 action points. And it's just single-handed. So the idea here is the Siren is going to hit you with both arms if it's able to. And that's what this first one is. Otherwise, it's going to still hit you with one of its 2 claws and still do some damage to you, but it's only half the damage. So that's the reason why there's 3 different weapons listed here. And this is true of all of the different Sirens. We'll kind of go over that as we look at each one. The armor on these things is pretty reasonable. The Instigator has 20 armor on every location except for the torso where it has 30. That's slightly better than your assaults have with their Odin armor. The 30 here on the torso, that makes a pretty good protection there. And then we also have the Psychic Scream ability on this particular one, which reduces the will points of all your enemies within a limited range. We'll cover that exactly what that is here just shortly. This is the only one of the different Sirens that does not have the mind control ability. So this is the weakest of them, and you're looking at still some pretty decent stats. So like I said, that's the first one you're likely to see. That's the Instigator. It does not have mind control. The rest of these guys do. The next one in line is the Harbinger. We take a look here. Same idea with the claws. Has Instill Frenzy, Mind Control, and Acid Spray. So I want to take 1 second here and kind of show you the difference. They have slightly different body parts like a lot of the other Pandorans do. Their heads are different. So if you look... this one, and maybe we can get a better look at it here. If you look here, this one's kind of got the round, sort of almost grasshopper-like head. And so that is the Psychic Scream head. This other one has more of a horned head. Looks vaguely demonic goat-like, I guess. I don't know. This is the Instill Frenzy head. So there's the 2 different heads, and then they each have different torsos as well. So there's just the normal torso, which the Instigator has, which has just has no extra abilities. It's just a torso. And then the rest of these, I think all of them, maybe not the Hellion, but they have the acid torso, which gives them an acid spray attack. And it's short range, but it's a wide cone. And we'll take a look at that here shortly too. But getting back into the Harbinger here, this one has the Instill Frenzy head. And so it's able to use that ability, Instill Frenzy. What it does is it increases all of its allies' speed within 20 tiles by 50% and makes them immune to panic. Now, it's the Siren itself does not benefit from this ability. Again, you have the mind control ability, and then you have acid spray, which we will look at. You have the 3 attacks, And then the acid's torso is where the acid sprays link. So if you take out the torso, you take that out as well. Both of these abilities, Mind Control and Instill Frenzy, are linked to the head. So if you disable the head, both of those abilities go away as well. This one, you're looking at pretty much the same armor. The heavy armor is actually on the head this time instead of the torso. Otherwise, it's about the same, just a couple fewer hit points on this one. So it's very slightly weaker, but only by 20 health. So it's not really that much different. Third one you're going to find is the Banshee. And again, you have the Instill Frenzy head on this one. It has Mind Control and Acid Spray, just like the other one. This one's a little different. Its arms are not slasher arms. It has injector arms, which do virus damage instead of bleed damage. So this one's going to hit you with the burst of 2 for 6 virus damage times 2 plus 40 actual damage times 2. And so it's more going to be affecting your willpower than it is getting you to bleed out so much. Much tougher hit points wise. This thing has 530 hit points instead of the 490 that we saw on the Instigator. And then we've got armor is again slightly heavier, 30 in 2 different locations this time, head and tail. Arms are still 20 and the torso is 20. Fourth one in line here is the Hellion. Good hit points on this one too, 510 hit points. It's back to the slasher arms, has Psychic Scream and Mind Control, doesn't have the acid torso this time. Nothing too much else going on here. Still a dangerous customer though. It takes a bit to chew through all these hit points. And then again, always the Psychic Scream and Mind Control are tied to the head. So if you disable the head, those abilities go away. And then the last one is sort of the elite. This is the Siren Armis. And this one has the orichalcum body parts. And so you've got the orichalcum torso, which has acid spray. This one's acid spray actually does more damage than the other one does. This one does 40 acid instead of 30. It's still effective range 6 in a cone. So the cone is 6 tiles long, 6 tiles wide at its end. And then the acid coats, all of your body parts that it hits and starts eating armor off of them first. And then it starts eating hit points after that. And acid damage is reduced by 10 per turn per body part that it's on. And so it sticks to all the different body parts. This one has the injector arms too, but it's slightly different because its dual attack actually does bleed damage instead of virus damage, where its single attacks do the virus damage. I don't know if that was a mistake or if that was intended to be that way. But that is how it is. So this thing, when it hits you with both arms at the same time, it's actually going to do bleed damage on you. It's going to do 40 bleed and 160 damage, just like the regular slasher arms. And then if you disable one of the arms, then it's going to start hitting you for virus damage instead. This one has much heavier armor, though. It's still only 490 hit points, just like the Instigator. But look at the armor. It's 40, 50, 40, 40, and 50. It's going to take a lot more to chew through this armor than it is to get through the other ones. So this one's going to be a little bit tougher. This one also has 50% resistance to virus damage. So any attempts to use virus damage to reduce its will points is going to meet a little bit of resistance there. It still takes damage from it, but only at half rate. So this one can instill frenzy, can do mind control, still has the acid cone. Again, the acid on this one is slightly more damage than the other ones. So that's the lineup, and that's the different sirens that you will run into in the game, and pretty much the order that you're probably going to see them in. Not necessarily exactly in that order, but it should be something pretty close to that. So in general, what are their strengths? Well, high hit points, obviously. Every single one of these guys has at least 470. 470 is the weakest on the Harbinger. Everybody else is at 490 or higher. They all have very high willpower as well, and this is probably one of their more dangerous traits. Willpower on these guys ranges from 32 all the way up to 40 on the Armis here. And so couple that with mind control. These guys are going to mind control your soldiers, period. And there's nothing you can do about it. If they get in range to do it and you haven't disabled their head yet, you're going to have a soldier mind control. Your soldiers don't have enough will points to stop it from happening. That's one of the things that really makes these guys dangerous. The other thing, aside from that, is that the AI is actually really good at moving these guys into hiding after they mind control one of your soldiers. And that's really annoying because then you can't get to them to, blast their head and disable it to free your soldier from the mind control, or it's much more difficult to do so. You'll see that after they mind control a soldier, they will actually run and hide from the rest of your soldiers as well as they can. Next up on their strengths list is their speed. These guys are fast. 22 movement here on this one, 28, whopping 28 on the Harbinger. This thing's smoking fast. 21 here, 24 here, and 28 here. So these things are really fast. Every single body part except for the head that you disable does reduce their speed, however. So they have speed tied to the tail, both arms, and the torso. So that's a little consolation, but it's, each body part's still pretty tough. And so it's not going to help you all that much. The tail is going to be your best bet if you're looking to reduce its speed. There's 10 movement tied to the tail. The arms are each 4, and I think there's 8 on the torso, if I remember correctly. And we can actually take a look at that right now. Let's just check it out real quick. So here at the tail, if we disable it, move range is -10, max hit points is -100. The arm is move range -4. The torso is move range -4 as well. And the head has the will points attached to it. Next strength of these guys, pretty decent armor. They all have at least medium grade armor compared to your troops at 20 on every location. Some of them are tougher than that. Most of them have at least 30 on at least one location. And again, the Armis has 40 and 50 on its different body parts. That's very, very heavy armor and takes some doing to crack. Unless you have a dedicated armor breaker that has something like the Berserker's armor break skill plus, a weapon that's going to hit more than one time, grenade, machine gun, assault rifle, whatever. That's pretty effective at breaking that kind of armor. But if you have to chew it down with just normal weapon fire and just normal, 1-point, 2-point shred attacks like the assault rifles, it's going to take you a bit of doing to get through there. Even grenades, you're going to hit it and it's going to reduce it by 10 per grenade. So you're going to have to even throw a few grenades at this thing to get its armor down to something reasonable. Mind control, again, pretty much their most dangerous ability these things have. And like I said, they'll use it, they'll get your soldier. You can't do anything about that. Even the weakest one at 32 will points has way more will points than your soldiers are going to have, even if they're maxed out and full. So you're going to get mind controlled if these guys get close enough to do it. We'll take a look at ranges and stuff like that here shortly. So where are their weaknesses? It doesn't seem like they have very many, but they do a little bit. The head is the obvious weakness on these things, and even it's not that weak. But the thing that makes it the biggest weakness for these guys is, number one, almost all of their will points are tied up to the head, right? So if we take a look at this, if we were to disable the head, that's -30 willpower on these guys. That's most of their will points. And so that goes a long way towards getting their will down to reasonable levels where they're not necessarily going to be able to mind control your troops right away. Even the Siren Armis is going to be down to 10 will points if you disable the head. Now, actually doing that takes some doing, because you're looking at, on these guys, 20 to 30 armor on the heads, generally speaking, and 160 damage. So most of the time, you're not going to be able to do it with one shot. Certainly not with a sniper rifle or with a assault rifle, at least until you get to the really high-end sniper rifles with extra abilities to increase damage and whatnot. So you're looking at probably at least two shots at the head with good hits to disable the head. And so that's going to be, again, some doing, but it's worth doing, because if you take away their will points, they're a lot less dangerous than they are with them. Another one of their sort of weaknesses is their perception. They only have 30 perception. Your soldiers have 35 at base, and then that's modified by gear. So they're not the most perceptive things. They're right there with the Tritons that don't have the sensor heads. and they are slightly more perceptive than the Arthrons. So it is possible that you're going to see them before they see you, depending on conditions and whatnot. So that might give you a chance to take a little bit of advantage of placement and first strike and stuff like that, which is going to be very good. The other weakness that they have is the tail. And the reason why is it's actually pretty big, and it does reduce their speed by a good amount if you take it out. So again, if we take a look at this guy, you know, the torso, if you look at it, pretty small. The head, very small. Arms are really spindly. You're not, you know, pretty hard to hit those things. But this tail down here, it's a much bigger target, especially here kind of at the curve where you can kind of get more of it into your circle. And I'm you know, got a rookie soldier with a cannon from a good distance away here, so this is kind of not the best. You know, if we take a look at the assault rifle instead, let's get at one of our assaults here and take a look at that same shot here. Okay, you know, your torso, we're got, you know, maybe 60% to hit the torso, whereas down here we're looking at more like 90%, 80 to 90% hits on the tail. So and then again, disabling that tail, it's going to take a couple of shots probably because it is armored with 160 health, but then it starts bleeding. Its move range is -10. That's cuts its speed not quite in half in most cases, but close to in half. Makes it a lot less dangerous. And so that's a good place to be shooting at them from long range to try and get them slowed down and get them bleeding, and just to kind of start working on them in general. The problem with the body parts is the same as every other thing, is you're only going to take out 1 or 2 body parts before you just kill it outright. The body parts individually have a lot more hit points than the overall hit points of the creatures. So you're looking at maybe taking the tail and the head if you are careful. And we'll talk about that in just a minute too, about if you're trying to capture one, because then you don't want it bleeding too much. But at the same time, you want to reduce its overall health. So we'll talk about captures here in just a few minutes. The third thing that's kind of a weakness about these guys is they don't have very much in the way of single action point abilities. Mind control is, and their instill frenzy ability is a single action point. Pretty much everything else they have is 2 action points, or 3 if they're doing psychic scream, which some of them can do as well. Being that they don't have many single action point abilities, that means Warcry is pretty good at locking these guys down once you have mind control disabled off of them. If you get the head disabled and get rid of mind control and you start Warcrying them, then it's just a matter of not being adjacent to them. You do still have to worry about the acid torso. It's 2 action points for that to fire. So technically speaking, they could stand still and spray acid at you. So you do want to stay more than 6 spaces away from these guys if you're trying to do this tactic, because they could spray acid at you at that range. 6 is the max range of the cone. So if you're 7 tiles away from them, you're going to be perfectly safe. And what that's going to do is that's going to force them to move, which means they're not going to have enough action points to attack even with a single arm. Give me just 1 second here. I'm going to bring in one of these guys on the Phoenix Point side so that we can take control of it and we can kind of get a better look at its actual abilities and kind of see how they work and so on. So I'm going to be step away for just 1 second, get that spawned in, and then I'll bring you right back. See you in just a moment. Okay, I'm back. We've got our very own Siren now. And so I just brought in a Harbinger so that we could just take a really quick look at it. So if we, again, take a look at the information, it's exactly the same. Has Instill Frenzy, Mind Control, Acid Spray. So let's take a look at that, though. If we look at the attacks, the Instill Frenzy is just like it is for everything else. It's a 20 tile radius, costs 5 will points to activate, and it increases everybody else's speed by 50%. Mind Control, the way Mind Control works is when it has a range of 10. So if we actually click on this and we zoom out just a little bit, you can see the bubble and the range at which mind control is effective, and that is 10 tiles. And so everything that's within 10 tiles is available to be mind controlled. The reason why we can't mind control this one is it's got more will points than we do, and so it's not able to be mind controlled. And how the mind control works, if you're not familiar, is the cost to activate mind control is equal to the will points remaining on the target. Okay. And so you have to have more will points than they do. And you lose that many will points, but then you gain control of them. And then after that, it costs a certain number of will points based on the size of the target and the type of the target to maintain that control. And so for the Arthrons, I believe it's just 1 action point per turn. For human soldiers, it's 2. I think Sirens are 5. Bigger things than that cost even more than that per turn. And so you can kind of gauge how long you're going to be able to maintain control based on what the thing is as well. So it's expensive to use mind control, but you do get full control of that entity until you either end it yourself or until you run out of will points to maintain it. Okay, so that's mind control. And then the acid spit, if we take a look at this, again, it's a cone, and it's a 6-tile long, 6-tile wide cone at the very end. And so you can get a decent number of victims in that, but they do have to be pretty close, like I said. And if you're more than 6 tiles away, obviously it's not going to hit. Right now, I think we're about 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 here. The end of this tile is actually the end of the cone. So if we were to come 1 tile farther away here and we activate it again, if we're really careful, we can catch 4 of them. But the way this works is it's actually targeting body parts, kind of like a grenade does. And so it's going to try to hit every body part that the cone is touching. And so what we'll find is if I do this acid spray, the 2 in the middle are going to get sprayed pretty much everywhere on their body, whereas the 2 on the outsides are only going to get 1 or 2 of their body parts hit. So let's take a look at that real quick. Let's activate this and we'll see what happens here. All right, here we go. So you can see 150 on both of them and only 60 on that one and 30 on this one. So, and if we take a look at their actual info now, this one just got it on the arm, 30 acid. And so what that'll do is that'll chew away these 20 points here and then 10 off of its hit points. And also 10, it'll do the same thing up on the regular hit points. This one, if we look at it, got acid on all 5 of its body parts. So 30 acid times 5 is 150 acid. Each one of these is going to go down by 10 per turn. And so this will drop down to 100 and then to 50 and then to nothing on the next few turns. Okay, and then over here, same idea. If we look at this one, it only got it on the tail and the arm because those were all that were in the cone. So it is pretty good about only hitting things that are actually in the cone. And so you do want to keep that in mind as you're aiming your cone if you ever have the opportunity to, mind control one of these things and use it, or even if you are up against it, right? So make sure you keep your soldiers spread out, make sure they're not within 6 tiles of this thing if you can help it at all, and B, if you can't help it, try to get them spread out by more than 6 tiles side to side so that it can't get more than one of your troops in the blast. So a little bit of spacing goes a long way with these guys. Psychic Scream, we've already talked about. It's 3 action points, 4 will points. The range on Psychic Scream is 12 tiles. And so it's a decent sized range. And the damage that it does is every soldier that's within that range takes minus 10 will points. And so it can chew up your will points really fast. It does cost, like I said, it does cost 3 action points to activate. So it's only going to do it once per turn. But you're gonna feel it, and then especially if it follows that up with a mind control on the next turn, it could even follow up immediately with a mind control if it didn't move, and so that's going to be something that you're gonna potentially watch out for. I don't know how good the AI is, if it would try to do that or not, but it's potentially possible that it could Psychic Scream and then mind control your soldier. And then in Still Frenzy, we have talked about is 5 will points. The radius is 20 on that. It's plus 50% movement rate and immunity to panic for everything except for the person casting it, right? So the Siren does not benefit from its own Still Frenzy, but everything else around it that's friendly does. One last thing I want to cover with these guys is capturing. They are able to be captured, obviously, and doing so actually takes some pretty good doing because their endurance and the amount of paralyzation damage that you have to do is based on their maximum total hit points. And so these guys are really tough, right? They're, 490, 510. So if you were trying to capture this Siren Hellion here, you would have to do 51 paralyzation damage to it or more to get it fully paralyzed. And that's just its max hit points divided by 10. And so if your goal is to capture them, I would still try to take the head out if I were you, because number one, that's going to make it a lot less dangerous when it loses its mind control and its psychic scream abilities. But the other thing that's going to do is that's going to reduce its actual endurance. If we look at the head, that's minus 50 max hit points, which isn't much, but that brings it down from 47 down to 42 paralyzation damage that you need to paralyze it. And when you're talking about using Heras and near razors, I mean, they're only doing 7 or 8 paralyzation damage per hit, and so even reducing it by 5 is another hit that you may not have to make on it. And if you can take out its tail, that's even better, because that's minus 100. So that's 10 paralyzation damage you don't have to do. Now, what you do want to be careful about is if you do both, it's going to start bleeding a good amount, 10 there and then 10 down here too. And so you don't want to be in a situation where it's going to bleed out before you can get it, get the mission finished up and get it captured completely. And that's a possibility, because you're going to do 160 damage here and you're going to do another 160 damage here. That's 320 of its 470 health. And that's if you hit it exactly on the nose, right? And odds are you're not going to hit it exactly on the nose. You're probably going to do more damage than that to each of those body parts, disabling it. And so at a bleed rate of 20, and if it's only got, 50, 60 health left, you only have a few turns left to get the mission finished up and get it captured. So you want to be really, really careful if you're going to try and go for both. There are other ways that you can deal with that if you really, really need to capture it. And if you have the ability to do so, you can actually get rid of its head and then you can mind control it. And then while it's mind controlled, you could use something to stop the bleeding, whether that's a med kit or whether that's something else. One of the mutoid abilities can stop bleeding, etc. So you can take that route if you want, but that's kind of edge case. You may not be set up to do something like that. You may not be set up to mind controlled in the first place, but that is an option potentially if it's bleeding too much and you have to capture it. And the reason I'm going over this is because one of the objectives that actually appears in the mission at some point is to capture a siren. And there's another one where capturing a psychic alien gets you unlocked research as well. And this is both, this one covers both of those bases. So if you can capture a siren, you get both of those objectives knocked out and it helps you out. But they are tough to capture, right? So you have to have pretty much a dedicated capture team, and they have to focus on doing it for the most part. The nice thing about paralyzation damage is it's not all or nothing, right? Is it does stack up on these things. And so as you gain more and more paralyzation on it, it loses more and more action points, depending on how much paralyzation you've done to it already. So that can be another method that you can use to kind of neuter them a little bit, but that's a bit of a long road. It's much easier probably to, if you're looking to slow it down or whatever, to just take out a body part or two, or even just kill it outright. It's usually easier than paralyzing it. So, but there are times where you want to paralyze it. And so that's my advice on that. Take out the head for sure, maybe the tail, and then finish the paralyzation after that with a little bit less endurance to deal with. Okay, guys, so that's going to do it for the Sirens. They are in the game reasonably early in most cases, and you're going to be dealing with them all throughout the game. They're fast, they're tough, and they're a handful to deal with. So make sure that you're getting your soldiers doubled up on them or tripled up on them. Focus on them for a turn or two even, and just get rid of them. Get rid of the head, maybe get rid of the tail, and let them bleed out or whatever. But you do have to focus on them because they are quite dangerous. Mind controlling one of your soldiers really can tip the scale of the battle away from your favor in a really big hurry. And like I said, once they have one of your soldiers mind controlled, they're really good. The AI is really good at hiding them where you can't reach them to finish off their head. So best not to let them get that close if you can help it. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes they kind of come scurrying around a corner and they're just already that close and you can't do anything about it. So that's what it is. In those cases, just do your best to get at it and get the head disabled to get your soldier freed up again. And otherwise, just like I said, just focus fire on them and get rid of them as quick as you can. So that's all I have for this one. And if you've enjoyed this video, do me a big favor, hit that like button for me. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. That would really help me out a lot. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.